The Forgotten Minotaur King. Side Story. The Attack on Mindas Castle. Part 1. Tristafe Myrink walked the halls of the royal palace, remembering to respond to the usual human attendants and servants, as well as the orc-kin guards she passed every day that offered her a "Hey, Odegra," or else,
"Yo, Odegra, these princes and princesses, am I right?"
falsely putting on a face of placid indifference one would assume came with the bloody reputation she'd gained during her short career as royal guard and occasional aide to Wet Boy Fugazi, despite her diminutive and unassuming mouseling appearance. Using the information she'd gathered as the latter, she was able to explore the castle grounds in search of Merkine's son, abandoning her post as patrolman of the Princess Wallabunga and Prince Dinge's chambers, both of whom were currently absent from their usual haunts, much to her mild concern. Approaching the surplused guest rooms, which were currently being used as much more comfortable and well-furnished prisoners' quarters, she spied the roaming detachment of half-orcan patrolmen that the monstrous, toad-like Prince Dinge seemed to have on loan from his, Myrink and Ahani's home kingdom. Her thoughts turned to Ahani for a moment. The two of them had grown to care for one another during this horrifically deranged quest of Kaisel's. Not that he had noticed in his pursuit of his work. She had even promised to take Ahani with her to visit Mont Shan once this work with the book was complete. The thought of visiting her estranged family even flickered for a moment, before that jolted her back to the operation at hand. One of those very estranged family members was being held captive in one of these rooms, her sister, Sori, whom she was under strict self-imposed orders to abandon in lieu of rescuing the mayor's son. Deep in the foundry beneath the castle's dungeon, Foreman Supervisor Whirl Dorks observed the lethargic and weary efforts of the journeymen and novice blacksmiths under his leadership. The Rakshasi royals above seemed to have hired just about any lazabout that applied, likely due to some old-world sectarian belief that anyone with dwarven blood just inherently had the ability to craft perfect horseshoes or lightweight chainmail for the guards that seemed to mill around the castle with no real purpose as well. Whirl had lived in Goldenrod for decades, even as a young dwarfling who had barely grown his first patches of light blonde chin hair. He had studied under Yor, the striped centaur, to craft and build, but that was before King Björk was assassinated. The human and dwarf workforce was ousted, and the whole town had went to hell. He'd hoped things would be different with the new royal family moving in, but he once again found his talents overlooked, this time in favor of some brutish ogre mercenary company. Would these slights ever end? As he reminisced on his younger days, when blacksmithy was an art, he couldn't help but notice the half-human girl, Norge, seemed to be neglecting her duties, sweeping up iron shavings while the artisans designed sword and axe hilts, in favor of gossiping among the other young'uns. He chastised her and the pair of accomplices she was wasting time with. They seemed to be discussing the upcoming execution of the spy being kept in the cells above their tower, along with the planned reclamation of the local medical university, which World took the time to enlighten them meant weapons and work for their foundry. making their lollygagging even more egregious in his eyes. They scurried back to work, Norge a little more hesitantly than the others. Whirl chalked it up to her half-human features, leaving her a little slow-witted than the optimal blacksmithy worker. When he readied to return to his overseeing duties, he was met with the lanky, shadow-wreathed form of the castle's librarian, descending the tower steps. A look of contemplation twisted his pallid and fanged face, which left Whirl very nervous. As Myrink entered the hall containing the guest chambers, she was chagrined to discover the 4 guest rooms were unmarked. With the tertiary information she'd gathered on duty, she hadn't been able to specify which held baby Court and his au pair Perna, nor which held her sister, the wife of the diplomat-turned-spy Oxor, whose rescue she was supposed to be sabotaging this very moment. Throwing caution to the wind, she confidently approached the group of 7 or 8 guards, all of which had some varying ratio of orcish and human features smeared across their generally dull-witted faces.
There has been an attack in the dungeon. Fugazi needs all of you down there to secure the prisoner.
Myrink's demeanor and frankness, likely boosted by her reputation, startled the guard patrol. But one guardswoman, possibly the group's leader, offered her a salute, paired with a look of genuine confusion.
Miss Odegra, Fugazi is already down there with the prince and princess, and they ordered extra guards down to the dungeon a few moments ago already.
Myrink blanched. Had the attack already occurred? How could Velwyn's men have moved so fast? Doubling down her efforts, she donned a mask of rage and again approached the guardsmen and women.
I report directly to Fugazi, and I said they need your men down there pronto. Now, do I have to discipline you cowards for treason?
Putting her hand to the holster of her ornate revolvers, she eyed the now scared, but still unmoving Orcan guardswoman.
I can't abandon my post completely. If there's after prisoners, they might come up here. You 4, head down to the dungeon. Roki, Gutter Boy, Lefty, you stay here with me and guard the prisoners. Sorry, Odegra, but if the wet boy has issues with us staying here, we'll take the punishment.
Myrink was a little taken aback by the disciplined and tactical nature of this guardswoman. The 4 she sent down to the dungeon fearfully scooted past Myrink as she stood, eyes locked on the guard's leader. Instead of continuing to patrol the halls lining the 4 unmarked doors, the guardswoman, along with the orc named Gutter Boy, went to the door second to last in the opposite direction that Myrink had arrived in. The second pair, Lefty and Roki, bracketed the one directly next to it. One issue down. Now she knew which rooms housed the prisoners, but she was left with the 4 half-orcs to deal with, and still no real plan on how to escape. This sort of half-cocked decision-making wasn't typical for her. Myrink took her time to contemplate her next few steps as she approached the Orcan guardswoman who stood up to her. Finally, when Myrink stood nose to chest with the guardswoman, diminutive, mousling size and all, she looked up into the guardswoman's face, who was attempting to avoid eye contact. However, the sweat lining her tannish green brow gave away her true resolve.
You are brave, disobeying a direct order from Fugazi. I am very proud of you and your men. But if I have learned anything from my time in the Levrida shares, it's that there are no half measures.
Unholstering her sidearm quicker than she could swat a fly, Myrink had the barrel underneath the guardswoman's chin. With a loud pop, a muzzle flash, and a sound like a melon being dropped from the highest tower in the castle onto a stony path, the entire top half of the guard's head erupted. Her partner, Gutter Boy, got it in the neck with Myrink's offhand piece. His head dangled off to one side as he crumpled to the carpeted castle floor, sword never leaving the scabbard. Lefty and Roki ducked in fear at the noise of the firearms going off. They probably had never heard a sound like it in their lives. A scream pierced the wooden barrier of the door that they had abandoned, followed by the sound of a baby crying.
Magnifique, I have found you.
Regaining some courage, Roki leapt from the floor. Brandishing a pair of war axes, he charged the Mousling. Unflinchingly, as he closed the less than 10 feet distance between them, Myrink unloaded another round into the orc's right knee, causing him to genuflect onto the now pulverized limb. He bellowed an excruciating yell of pain, which Myrink ended with another burst to Roki's temple. Throughout all of this, Lefty remained on the ground, cowering. Myrink gestured for him to stand. He shakingly complied. Then, with the barrel of her gun, she motioned for him to open the door that the screaming was emanating from. Again, he complied. As he did so, the screaming grew louder, the occupant likely thinking that her life was over, as the confused and gormless orc hunched in the doorway before her and baby Court. With a final muzzle flash, Lefty went flying from the sideway of the entry, and the screaming finally ceased. Approaching the room, Myrink confidently holstered her firearms.
Sorry for the dramatics, but I wanted you to know that the close was clear.
Before her, in the room, was the small apricot-furred form of her sister, Soiree Myrink, and in her arms was the tiny Minotaur calf, Court Lehman.
Please, don't kill me. Are you from Moshin? Are you here to rescue me? There is another girl. She is in the restroom.
Backing from the room, Myrink gazed at the door the first guardswoman had been in front of. Out peeked a frightened, red-headed elven girl's face, who recoiled at the bloodbath. In the actual guest room, Soiree stood up, cradling Court in her arms. She approached the disguised Mousling before her, who she still had no clue was her very own sister.
Are you here to rescue us?
Exasperation flooded Myrink's head as she ran her pawed hand over her face.
I suppose I am. Let's get going.